Hey friends, it's Patrick Scullin here. I'd like to talk about what I like. Uh, Today's video is dedicated to Andrew Loomis. Andrew Loomis, his book Figure Drawing and All It's Worth. I have a few of his books and I really like them. They have a lot of really excellent information in them, and they're a great drawing course and a study course for any artist or illustrator really trying to level up their game and understand the fundamentals of storytelling. In particular, his figure drawing is impeccable, and his instructions in the book are excellent on working from many different vantage points, dealing with the basics of anatomy, working on light and shadow, construction, movement, all different kinds of forms of, uh, you know, techniques for drawing and making your work better. Andrew Loomis, worked in the early 1900s, part of the golden age of illustration, and made these books as a way of sharing his knowledge. And I find looking backward and studying his books is it's a treat to go back and see, what some of those fundamental teaching ideas were all about. Because in today's world, we maybe think that we've got it all figured out, but actually, just looking back a few decades, you can learn some real gems from folks like Andrew. And just to highlight a couple things, I like looking through the book and pulling out a few little quotes. Sometimes they're a little dated, sometimes they're really relevant. It's funny. But here's an excellent thought. He says, "I feel that talent means little unless coupled with an insatiable desire to give an excellent personal demonstration of ability." What does that mean? Hard work is just as important, or maybe even more important than talent. Translation is what he's saying here, right? You can rest and get by for a while on talent, but you really got to put in the hours, put in the pencil mileage, as a friend of mine says, for you to actually be successful. Um, Another little gem: every bit of work the artist does starts out with the premise that it has a message, a purpose, and a job to do. Practical, good advice. So his approach to figure drawing is pretty standard. Work on proportion, work on size and scale. He has his own diagrams for how to, build the figure, whether it's 5 heads or 7.5 heads or whatever it is, figuring out your placement on the page. But he also, in the very first chapter, talks about something interesting. He says that you should be able to learn how to draw the figure without reference, and how important that is, especially for an artist or a designer or an illustrator, to build comps or samples or thumbnails, creating ideas to tell someone else or yourself what your story or what your illustration is going to be, and how if you can capture in a few lines the essence of your story or your character, you've really got it nailed. And he really emphasizes that quick drawing, that construction, that build up. It's really good. Of course, he gets into muscle tone and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how many times I've tried to commit to memory all the muscles in the body. Can't stick in there. So I always got to look back at these books. But visually, you need to become familiar with muscles and where they go and how they work to really improve your figure drawing. Then he gets into balance and movement and other kinds of techniques for building up the figure. Of course, he works in a traditional method, which is working with kind of a nude model in the anatomy, focusing on that, because if you understand the figure, then you understand how that figure is going to interact with clothing, its environment, how it will work in perspective, all those kinds of things. So fundamentally, learning how to draw is really critical, and working from a book like Figure Drawing for All It's Worth by Andrew Loomis is a good way to go. I actually pulled up one of his illustrations and wanted to share it with you guys. So here we go. I found this one. I didn't pick it for any particular reason other than it really stood out to me. I liked the square frame. It's a cute little message, and it said something. It was called something like, the modern father or something like that. And you can think about that in the era. You could see with his suit and pipe, that era may have been the 40s or the 50s, but here this professional man is taking care of his daughters at bath time. And so that's kind of a fun illustration showing this attentive father. And what I really liked too was the color and how simple the color is, just the blue and the gray, which is probably a result of the printing requirements, keeping the color simple for reproduction. But the artists at that time, the illustrators in those days, did an excellent job of working with limited color palettes and really telling a story. And that's what I love about illustration in general, is just how to tell a story and really tell it well. And so look at this picture. Not only is the figure drawing excellent, you can see that he must have worked from models to be able to put together these this little family here, but also just the accuracy, the clothing. And then when you focus in closer, you can kind of see the, just the clothing, the folds, the way he approached those things, even little blotches on the hair and stuff, just a brushstroke. It's so amazing to me how with simple brushstrokes, they could carry so much information. So there's like a confidence, there's a simplicity to it, which I really like. What I also like is looking a little deeper, looking under the hood at composition. And this is something that Andrew Loomis was really good at. Here I applied some grid lines, and you can see a basic square grid applied to this illustration. So he must have designed his page this way. And you can see how it's divided. The composition is asymmetrical. Obviously, the dad kind of takes over the right side. The daughters are on the left, but you can see that dividing line in the middle, and how on the one side he's kind of straight and square, and the daughters are kind of in a circular pattern. You can see, that sweep here. Let me get that. Yeah, you can kind of see that curve. Intentional. That's what's fun about, dissecting an illustration like that, is to see how the master would use guides and, compose that picture. Here, I'm going to add a couple more guidelines. Look at this. When I add diagonals, that's when you can see some other things come around. Look at how just applying a diagonal line from the corners, you can see obviously the center focal point, but look at how each daughter kind of has their quadrant of the pie shape, the one standing up, the one throwing the soap, and the one sitting on the floor. Each one is kind of settled in their little spot. And again, that's intentional. Everything is balanced. Look at how even that bar of soap is right in line with that curve. That was intentional. Also, one thing I really love are the expressions. I mean, look at the calm concern of the dad, just kind of getting by, the little disheveled hair up in the top. And this little girl has some pretty great curls, but I love the little expression on her face, just a little smile, maybe a little annoyed, dad's cleaning out her ear. But these types of illustrations are charming and fun from an early era, but they're completed and finished with, precision. They're so precisely designed and painted that they look effortless. And that's what I really love about analyzing and looking at classic illustration. So that's a little bit more about Andrew Loomis and what I think of him and why I like him and what he does. He's somebody that hardly anybody talks about anymore, maybe in art schools, and illustrators know about him, but I love his books. I love his art and love analyzing how he tells a story, because ultimately your technique may be entirely different than this kind of illustration, but storytelling always comes through. All right, so that's my thought for the day. Catch up with you later. See ya.